my name's Gavin Johnson-Lynn. This is my presentation from Build Out a Breaker. So a quick introduction to myself. Who am I? Currently I work as an offensive security specialist at Sage. Sage is a company that writes accounting software and is a FTSE 100 company. I've been a software developer for a very long time, career spanning about 20 years professionally as a software developer. The last 5 or so have been working at Sage. Before I worked at Sage, security wasn't a very big factor in the software development that I did. As I worked at Sage, it became more important, and I started doing a lot more security. I support local security groups, IC Squared, OWASP, I always try to attend. I very much try to work smart all the time, so I try to find ways to be more efficient. And I'm a total imposter. Certainly as a software developer, I always felt like an imposter. People used to say I was quite a good software developer, but I was never quite sure whether to believe that. So a quick note on the presentation. It's kind of split into 2 pieces. The first part is how I got onto a red team, and the second part is a few of the interesting things I've done since I've been on a red team. So, as a software developer, I hit what felt like kind of a roadblock. So, as I say, I've been a developer for a long time, and I wanted something different. Certainly, as a software developer, I didn't just do software development. I like to understand the areas around it. I like to try to look at improving testing, improving user interfaces, learning patterns, thinking about architecture, DevOps, that sort of thing. So I like to understand areas around it, but none of those really did it for me that much. So I wanted something new, something exciting. At the time, I thought, changing direction, I want to be a software architect. So a software architect is kind of a natural progression from a software developer. A lot of the same skills, but it's a kind of a higher level job. There are much less, far fewer software architects out there, and it's a bit more interesting. You tend to get to do more interesting things. And obviously I wanted more money as well. So I thought, how do I get these things? Usually when you work for a business, you tend to get pushed in a direction by the business, maybe not intentionally, but you work there, they want you to do certain languages, they want you to do things in a certain way. If they decide to change the language they're using on a project, then you kind of have to learn that language and go in that direction. That wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted to choose my own direction. I wanted to be very clear on my own direction. So I thought, I need some goals to help me do this. So January 2017, I made a plan. Obviously, I was still working as a software developer, so I had to continue with my day job. I decided to stop working on the improvement of the software developer side and work on other things that would move me towards being a software architect. I wanted to sprinkle some security in there. It looks like there's a lot for a sprinkle of security. Really, the security aspect was because to be a software architect, certainly where I work, there's a security requirement. You need to know a reasonable amount about security. You need to run threat modeling sessions. You need to understand security implications, both on a software development side and kind of a DevOps side and all that sort of stuff. So it would be useful to get me there to understand a lot more about security. So to do that, I wanted to start going to OWASP sessions, IC Squared sessions. There's a certification called CSSLP, which is the Certified Secure Software Lifecycle Professional. So that's very much aimed at software development lifecycle and putting security in there. So obviously that linked in quite well with what I was doing. So it was elements of software development, it's a software architecture, that sort of thing, but lots of security in there. Also where I work, there are security champions. So in software development teams, they have software developers, software testers, and software architects who often take on the role of a security champion for a project. And this means that they're essentially pushing security for the software that we're writing on that team. So I wanted to take a more active part in that and become a security champion. On the software architect side, it's very difficult to get a job unless you've got experience doing the job, but it's difficult to get experience doing the job unless you've got the job. So I set about trying to get some experience and thought, how do I do that? So I talked to a few people and they said, ask. So I asked and they said, yes, we'll give you some work as a software architect, which kind of stunned me. It was that simple. I just had to ask, really. Okay. So I got to do some interesting projects on the software architect side. I managed to do a piece around blockchain, which was very interesting. And also blockchain's got elements of security in it, so that was really useful towards the security objective as well. So what did I learn from all that? So obviously there was a lot of security in there, so I learned a lot of security. I'd gone from a point where I was working as a software developer on a payments-based project, so it had some security in there, but I was by no means doing lots of security work all the time. And went from that to actually, I don't want to say know lots about security. I think there are obviously lots of people who know a lot more about security than I do, but certainly from where I'd been, I knew a lot more about security. I also looked at different ways of learning, so that this is part of the kind of working smarter stuff that I did. So I try to look at different ways of being better at learning things. One of those in the top there is Anki, so that it's kind of a spaced repetition tool. It helps you learn by repeating things at different intervals to try and get them into your brain. I tried using different mediums, so I was reading books on the subject. I was using things like Pluralsight and Cybery, which are video-based. Pluralsight I'm a big fan of. That was probably the first kind of online course I did around security, was on Pluralsight. I kind of immersed myself in security, really. So even in the car, when I was driving to work, I'd listen to podcasts in the car about security. So I was just doing security stuff all the time. Also, in terms of different ways of learning, I was trying to think about more technical ways of getting things into your brain. So I was looking at purely going from Google searches, how do you learn things more quickly? Things like memory palaces, mind palaces, all sorts of different techniques of learning. Lists of things came up, and that was really useful. And those sorts of things continue to be useful now. And one of the big things I learned was the more security I did, the more I enjoyed it. So I really got to enjoy security. I really started to become passionate about security. I was doing more and more, and I was just kind of immersed in it, and that was because I liked it. So a quick note on the certification I did. So I started doing revision for it in January 2017. I passed it in December 2017, so that's kind of a year. Like I say, I'd looked at different methods of study, so it'd be really helpful, not just in terms of security, but I think I put in about an hour a day's worth of effort, and that worked out as something like 350 to 400 hours across a year, which, looking at it now, makes me think I actually worked really hard on that. I don't think I'd realised that at the time, but that's like 10 weeks of full-time work, right? So that I worked hard. And a quick note on certifications. So obviously I was going from a point of not actually knowing that much about security, and I wanted to get to a point where I knew lots about it. And how do you get there? The only way that made sense for me was the kind of structure that a certification gives you. So that structure was really useful and really necessary for me, which is why I chose to do a certification. It was also interesting that by telling people I work with that I was doing the certification, they pushed more security work in my direction. So I was actually getting more experience while I was doing the certification. So I wasn't just getting knowledge, I was getting experience of using that knowledge as well, which was really useful. So, recap on the timescale. January 2017, I started on the CSSLP. December 2017, I passed it. October 2018, by this time, I'd been getting more and more experience of it at work. More and more kind of security work had been coming my way. And really, I was thinking, am I still aiming for software architecture? Maybe I want a pure security role. So I set myself a different goal. I changed my mind. I told myself I wanted a pure security role by October 2021. I kind of filled in the details of how I was going to get there, and December 2018 came along, and at work they advertised a load of security roles. So I went through this kind of mental roller coaster of, I'd really like one of those jobs, and I haven't got enough skills or experience for those jobs, but I'd really like one of those jobs, but really there's no way I'd get one of those jobs. And I eventually convinced myself to apply for the job, and somehow got it. Again, going back to imposter syndrome. So takeaways I got from this. It was really hard work. I put a lot of effort in, but it was certainly worth the effort. And the fact that I enjoyed the subject so much made the hard work kind of worthwhile. Working smart was also really useful to me. Like I say, I think I've got skills that I can now use going forwards and not just security skills. And for me, it was a route into the industry. So again, going back to this, how do you get a job that requires experience without having experience? I'd been in the dev role. I'd done some security work. I'd pushed myself to learn more and more and get the skills and get the experience. And that eventually led to a way into a security job. So switching to being part of a red team. So I've got an L plate over there. Again, to say I've been in the job 6 months. I'm by no means some fantastic pen tester or red teamer. So just looking at the two sides of the job, so we're not 100% red team. The job I do is a lot of pen testing as well. And it's interesting to look at the two sides of pen testing and red teaming and see that they're just totally different parts of the job. So pen testing is a part of the job where you can be as loud as you like, you can find as many vulnerabilities as you can, and it's more kind of tick boxes. I've tried all these things. Red teaming is very much different. There's a lot of planning to it. There's a lot of thought goes into it. There's a lot of kind of, we want one way in. What happens if things go wrong? We want to be nice and quiet and not get caught doing things. So it's really interesting to look at the two sides that are very different parts of the job, but they're also useful to each other. So a lot of the things I'm learning on the pen testing side is very useful on the red teaming side. And a lot of the thoughts around the red team work have an impact on how we think about pen testing as well. So it's two very different kind of sides of the same coin, but it's really interesting to be part of that. And it keeps the job really interesting as well. So you're certainly not doing just one job, certainly not doing one thing over and over again. So on to some of the things that I've done that I've really enjoyed as part of the job. There was a piece of red teaming work that we wanted to do, and we were planning for it. And part of this work, we were planning to tailgate into the building. And you've got to realise, our plan was to tailgate into this building for a number of days. So we were going to be kind of tailgating in, tailgating to lunch, tailgating to the toilet every time you want to go to the toilet. And the thoughts were, maybe some people are going to start noticing us. Maybe people are going to realise we're just tailgating all the time. So how do we get around that? What's a good way to get around that? So our thoughts turned to cloning ID cards. So ID cards, the kind of standard card you get just to put on a plate, and that opens the door for you. So we started to try to understand what would be involved in cloning an ID card. To do that, we used this device, a Proxmark. First thing we did was look on YouTube and find lots of videos, and all those videos, or most of those videos, were, you kind of press the little button, you wave the ID card at it, and it's cloned. Magic. It's really not that simple. So over the following weeks, I gradually learned more and more about cloning ID cards, and started to understand how there were so many different kinds of ID cards. Some of them had security vulnerabilities, some didn't have any known ones. So really, we put a lot of work in, and eventually got to a point where we could clone some ID cards. And that kind of moment when you put a couple of weeks work into something, feeling like you're just banging your head on a wall, not understanding it, to getting there and actually cloning an ID card was brilliant. That moment you put the card on the door and the light turns green and you can open the door, was brilliant. It turned out on the job we took it on, we couldn't clone the ID cards, but it was interesting. The next thing we did, we made a hardware implant. So this was a device we could plug into the network to hopefully get easy persistence onto the network. So plug an RJ45 in, power, and hopefully we'd be on the network and have some sort of persistent box on the network. This was made out of a Raspberry Pi. We had 4G connectivity on it, and really served as a command and control. I quite like this picture because you can see the screws are sticking out. So this is the actual picture of the implant in place. And you can see the screws sticking out. That kind of gives you a thought to the nature of how we built the tools, and just the kind of, it was just interesting that it's put together like that. So what we use that for, so when we first plugged it into the network, the idea is it calls out to a box that we've got on Azure, and we can essentially remote into the implant via Azure. The first thing that happened was SSH was blocked on the network we were using, so we couldn't get straight into it. Luckily, we could change that to use HTTPS instead, so we could still get into it. Where we work, we use Microsoft Teams for a lot of the kind of messaging we do. And we made it so that this box could talk to us via Microsoft Teams, so that essentially the first time it connected to the network, it sent us a message saying, I've connected, hey, which was happy. But also other notifications, so we had it giving us a heartbeat, so kind of every couple of hours, it would send us a message to say, I'm still alive, I'm still on the network, everything's alright. So that was really useful. And obvious things like file exfiltration, that sort of thing, it was really useful for that. Last thing I'm looking at, USB Rubber Ducky. So I think a lot of people probably already know what a USB Rubber Ducky is. In case you don't, it is a device where you can essentially program it to type things really quickly. So you have it in your own computer, you tell it what it's going to type, and then you take it to an unlocked workstation, you plug it in, it types those things really quickly. So you can use it for typing in scripts to execute, or you can get it to download a script off the internet to execute, or you can just do silly things like change people's backgrounds and things like that. So it's a good tool, but that for me wasn't the best bit about this tool. The best bit was actually finding someone to use it on. So a lot of what we do is against systems. It's against a network, it's against a website, an API, a building, that sort of thing. But this is actually using it against a specific person. So maybe you've seen someone get up and go to the toilet and leave the workstation unlocked. And you've kind of got to think, is anybody looking? I'm going to go up, I'm going to put it in. What happens if somebody comes back? What happens if their friend comes along and says, what are you doing? So this was really scary. It was exciting. It felt mischievous. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but that made it by far the most fun thing I've done so far. And I look forward to using it again. So final note, would I want to be a developer again? Software development's nowhere near as exciting as this is. No. No. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier in the talk, you said you did about an hour of work a day, and it turned out to be like 400 hours over a year or whatever. But like what did that work include? Was that just sort of watching YouTube videos, or was that actually doing practice?
That was a lot of variety. So some of it was kind of reading and making notes. Some of it was Pluralsight or Sideread videos. I didn't actually include the kind of podcasts in that. Some of it was using the kind of spaced repetition tool. So if I was just in a waiting room for something, I could use that tool just on my phone, and it does kind of flashcards. Yeah, a wide variety of things. Yeah, it could be interesting.
What did you use in your mind for a pretext for if somebody did one drop to you and say, excuse me, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I'd dressed that well enough myself in my own mind. Yeah, I think something along the lines of IT support, you report an issue, right? Kind of thing. But yeah, that needs more thought, definitely, yes. Okay, thank you very much.